That is not how I thought that would go. Good morning. Welcome to Coffee and the Word. Oh, the plans we make, the things we think, the way we think things should go. Most of us have an idea of how we expect things to go. In fact, it starts very early in our life. We start deciding very early in our life what it's going to look like when we get older, what it's going to look like when we get bigger, what it's going to look like when we get stronger, what it's going to look like, and on and on and on and on it goes. And it doesn't really change when you grow into adulthood. There are many things that we kind of expect to happen the way we want them to happen, and when they don't happen the way we think they should happen, we often choose things that aren't good for us. We choose avenues that aren't good for us. Sometimes we make choices early on that affect the reality later on. In fact, that's kind of the story that I kind of want to start with here. We've been going through the book of Genesis and Job. We're going chronologically through the Bible, and we met Abram last time I spoke. And now Abram and Lot are off in the Never Land, the promised land, the eventual promised land, and they're there, and they have too many livestock to be able to cohabitate. And so Lot and Abram go up on this mountain, and they look across the two different directions, and Abram, the kind uncle that he is, says to Lot, "Which way do you want to go?" And Lot looks one way, and he sees lush, beautiful green grass, wonderful watering holes. He's like, "That's the way I want to go. That's the place that's going to be the easiest for me to do what I have to do." And so Abram went the other way. And so Lot went down to his new paradise to raise his family and his cattle. And when he gets there, he discovers that though the land is lush, it isn't everything he thought it would be. The people there were very wicked. And so eventually, Lot finds himself in some very, very terrible situations, trying to protect angels at one point. But things don't go the way he thinks they're going to go. Like, he thought he would go down there and live a peaceful life. And this is one of those things where you say, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And so, essentially, Lot, who chose the choicest of lands, is now running from the choicest of lands because it's about to be destroyed by sulfur and fire from heaven. And so he goes running off, and it didn't happen like he thought it would happen. And afterwards, he lost his wife because his wife looked back, a whole different lesson. Not going to cover that one today. But when he got to the other side, his daughters decided to try and make it what they thought it should be. And so they eventually have children with their father because they have to fix it because it's not the way they thought it would be. Their husbands or eventual husbands didn't come with them when they fled Sodom and Gomorrah, and so now they're taking matters into their own hands. That doesn't go well. And then Abraham and Sarah are supposed to have a son, but that's not happening, and they're getting old, and so they come up with their own plan, and that's not the way it was supposed to happen. When God called Abram out of his hometown, everything was going to happen the way he had it in his head. And yet nothing's happening the way. So Sarah says to Abram, we need to have a kid. And so why don't you have a kid with my servant, and then that'll be our kid, and Ishmael's born, and they don't like Ishmael, and it's just chaos because that's what keeps happening to us. When we start trying to get ahead of God's plan, when we start operating outside of God's purpose, we find that it doesn't happen the way we thought it would. And we have to understand that one of the things that is required for us to be able to operate inside God's plan, for us to be able to operate under God's provision, we need to understand that His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. His timetable is not our timetable. And so Abraham and Sarah both at one point laugh at God when he tells them that they're going to have a son because they're both old. And I'm going to tell you something. Nothing is impossible with God. In fact, Jesus says this way, all things are possible with God. And so while things don't quite work out like we think they should, that doesn't mean they're not working out. You only need to be faithful. You only need to continue to serve the living God. The story's not over. So Abraham finally gets his son. Wonderful story, right? Isaac is born. They love Isaac. Isaac is the perfect little baby boy whom they've waited for 100 years to see. And he's finally here. The child of promise has arrived. And then he gets old enough and God says, I want you to go sacrifice that child. You want me to do what? With what? But here's the crazy thing. I think Abram's beginning to learn. Because he does it. He takes his son up on a mountain and is preparing to sacrifice his son as God had promised, as God had required of him. And then God says, now I know that you fear me and you'll do what I call you to do. Sometimes we just have to get to the edge of the test for God to jump in and solve the problem. I'm warning you. A lot of us are not seeing the big move of God because we move away from God way before God moves. We don't respond the way we should. We act out of anger and dispute instead of out of graciousness and goodness. We don't season our words with love. We season them with bitterness and anger. And we aren't doing what is good and right. We're doing what makes us feel better. And I'm telling you, it's never going to work or go the way you thought it would go, as long as the way you're going isn't the way he called you to. Abraham eventually learns this lesson to some degree. I wonder if we will. I wonder if we'll ever learn the lesson that God's ways are better than our ways. God's ways are higher than our ways. God's ways will reap better benefits than ours. Remember, we serve a God who has the ability to work all things together for the good. We live in a world where it seems like everything works together against us. Maybe it's time we start serving him instead of our interests. Maybe it's time we start trusting him instead of our judgment. I hope you have a great rest of your Monday. Normally I call these Monday morning encouragement, and if you want to hear an encouragement, here's the encouragement. Find out what God does and what God wants, and then do it, even if it doesn't make sense to you, because his ways are better and more profitable, and you will reap the benefit even if you can't see it now. God bless you. Have a wonderful Monday. This has been another edition of Coffee and the Word.